So I want to welcome you today to this call on thinking. I had a hard time trying to decide what to call the call on thinking because thinking is such a slippery thing. We think we know what thinking is, but we really don't know what thinking is at all. And the more we think about it, the less we know about it, and the less that can be known, and thinking is not what we always think it's going to be. So today I want to say some things that are probably going to be in opposition to some of the things that you think you know about thinking. And why would I do that? Why would I want to do that? It's because I want to shake up the mind. Just shake it up. I really want to blow your minds today. And that's not really a very comfortable thing sometimes, but we all have had the experience where the paradigm that we work with and live with doesn't work, and we have to move on to something else. It feels like the ground is unsteady because we're so used to our ground of thoughts and belief systems that when they change, it's somewhat eerie. So I've got a story to tell you, and this occurred in 1992. I had met Al Gore, and I lived in Tennessee, and of course he was nominated to run for vice president, and he and Clinton ran for office, and they won. And I said, well, I'm going to go to that inauguration. I'm going to the Clinton-Gore inauguration. So a friend of mine was also planning on going, but at the last minute, I really didn't get to see him. I went up there by myself, and I got a room, and my friend calls me and said, oh, my gosh, he says, you've got to have a ticket to get into the inauguration. And I said, well, what am I going to do? I mean, I'm here. I'm all ready to go. I don't have a ticket. He says, well, call your congressperson, and you'll be able to get a ticket. So I called the office of my congressperson and found out that all the tickets were gone. So here I was in Washington, D.C. I had all my clothes and everything ready to go to the inauguration and maybe to go to some of the parties and other events for the inauguration, but I had no ticket. So I just decided to go anyway. And I figured that somehow I would get a ticket. So I dressed up, and it was so cold. I had this fake fur coat and this I stopped and bought some wool socks, and I had everything on I could. I mean, it was probably below freezing that day. And I got on the metro, and I kept saying to myself, I'm going to the inauguration. I have a ticket. I'm going to get in. And, of course, I didn't have a ticket. And I'd picture myself walking through the gates and getting in. And I kept getting closer and closer, and I'm thinking, what am I going to do? And it's like, well, just don't worry how you're going to do it, because my stand was that I was going to the inauguration. So I got to the station, and I found out how to get to where the inauguration was being held, and I walked down the street, and I kept seeing myself going through the gates and seeing myself getting in the inauguration. And I got up to like 50 feet from the gate, and there were people taking tickets to get in past the gate into the inauguration, and I'm going, okay, I'm getting in the inauguration, but things are a little tight here because I'm almost at the door. And I was standing there thinking, okay, something's got to happen. And I heard someone say, does anyone have a ticket, an extra ticket? And somebody said, yeah, I've got an extra ticket. And then I thought, oh, great, this is my chance. And I said, do you have another ticket? And they said no. And so I just said at the top of my lungs, does anybody have an extra ticket for the inauguration? And somebody looked at me, and they pulled out a ticket. And they said, sure, I've got an extra ticket. So I took the ticket, and I just walked in the door. And the place that I got to be was probably much better than the place that I would have gotten to be if I had gotten one from my congressperson in the first place. I want you to notice what is going on in your mind right now. Is there any kind of story? Are you telling yourself something about this? Maybe, boy, isn't she lucky? It isn't that great. The law of attraction works. All kinds of stuff. You are probably having a story. And what I'd like to say is that the story that I told is true. It's a very true story. However, it's not true in the sense that it's only a story now. There's no there's nothing there. It's just words in a linear fashion that I've told you in hopefully somewhat of an entertaining way. And then what your mind has done is it's taken that story and it's done something with that story, and it's churning. It's thinking about it, or maybe that I've interrupted your thought, but now it's not doing it so much. But when I was telling the story, your mind was probably generating side stories and thoughts. And that's what our mind does. It just generates all this thinking. So what we really have is that we're third hand from reality, or fourth hand from reality, because we start out and there's reality, and that's what's happening now. But what was happening now was that I was telling a story about what happened in the past. So we've got reality, and then we've got me telling a story about what's happening in the past, and then we've got your mind telling a story about what the story that I'm telling. So we're more and more layered and removed from reality. And it's by virtue of our thought that we were removed. Thought removal, it removes us. Thought removes us from reality. I'm just giving that a second to sink in. Thought removes us from reality. In 1997, I had an awakening. God knows I was due one, because I had been seeking for years for an awakening. And so it happened. And so I found out at that point that everything that I believed and everything that I knew was useless information. All the techniques that I had used, all the affirmations that I had used, they were useless because I was at complete peace. I was in complete peace. Just think about this. If you have an affirmation or a thought or a goal, and that is that you want 20/20 vision, but you have 20/20 vision, is that thought, does it have any relevance now? No, it doesn't. Because it's nuts to have a goal for 20/20 vision when you've got 20/20 vision. You might as well go on to something else. Or if you have an affirmation, I have a blue house, I want a blue house. And you imagine yourself, and your house is blue, it's painted blue on the outside, and you're using that thought to motivate yourself so the house will get painted, then that's one thing. But what happens when the house is blue? You don't need that affirmation. You don't have an affirmation, I have a blue house. You have a statement then, I have a blue house. So positive thoughts bring positive results, and negative thoughts bring negative results. I mean, how many of you have heard that? I mean, you must have heard that by now. But the question that I have to ask you about that particular set of information is that enough? Have you been able to manipulate your thoughts to the point that there was nothing missing by using those two thoughts, that positive thoughts bring positive results and negative thoughts bring negative results? If those are true, and those are true statements, then why is that not enough? Why is that not enough? It's not enough because thoughts don't tell the whole story. And feelings don't tell the whole story either. Feelings and thoughts are addictive. And feelings are even more addictive than thought. And next week I'm going to be talking about what you do with your feelings. This week I'm talking about what we're doing with our thoughts. But feelings are just as addictive as thoughts, if not more. They drive us so much. But they don't tell the story. I'm sure most of you have heard of the book, As a Man Thinketh. And that book was inspired by a verse from the Bible, and it's from Proverbs 23:7. And the verse is, as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. Or it doesn't say that, but as a woman thinketh in her heart, so is she. And this thinking component that we're talking about is in the heart. We think about thinking in the mind, but the heart has intelligence. And the intelligence in the heart is really more powerful than the intelligence in the brain. I read about an experiment that I loved, and that is where they took probes and they connected them to the heart. And they had little wires that went out, and they connected these probes to things as far out as 50 feet from around the subject. And they had it connected to rocks and trees and the ground and grass. And when they took measurements, when the person had a strong emotion that was hooked to the probes, the measurements registered those emotions as far as 50 feet away. And so thought, really, we think of it in words, but thought is more than that, because thought is really energy and information. That's the two things that we have to have: thought, energy, and information. But we think of thoughts as words, and they're so much more. And when we are seduced to thinking if we only manipulate our words as thoughts that everything will be okay, we're missing a lot of the picture. It doesn't mean that we can't control and work with our thoughts and get better results in our lives, but it means that we won't get that fulfillment and that relaxation that we are driving ourselves toward as spiritual beings. That drive is called mukmashupa. It's the drive toward our own spiritual self. And we were born with it, just like we were born with when we stop breathing, then we have this need to breathe. We have this need to eat. Well, we also have this need to be who we are and know who we are, and that's the drive that runs us. And we try to answer that drive through thought, by mentally coming up with all kinds of things that will satisfy it, and that won't work. So there's some good news and bad news about thinking. And I've been alluding to that, and that is that once you find out that you have some choice and control, you find out that thoughts are not really enough to bring happiness. It's the direct experience of life that actually tunes into happiness. Happiness is already present. We don't manufacture it. It's already here. Have you ever had a great day and you want to tell somebody about the great day you had? But when you start trying to talk about the great day in words using thoughts behind those words, it doesn't convey. You might say, well, gosh, I got up and the air was really beautiful, and I got in my car and I drove to the grocery store, or I drove to work and the sun was shining. But none of that can convey the power and the reality of what you were experiencing in that day. Because it wasn't that kind of day, not the kind of day that you could recite the history, the linear thought patterns of the history of what happened or what occurred in the day as the direct experience of reality and happiness that you had. Because it was the kind of day that was mitigated by the heart, by an intelligence, by sweetness, by life, by reality itself. We are addicted to our thinking. Totally addicted. And there are two kinds of thought. Because I'm not going to suggest to you to quit thinking. That would be crazy. You can't quit thinking. It won't happen. It will never happen. But I can encourage you toward something between your thoughts, toward that space between your thoughts. So that the two kinds of thinking are, number one, and that is the original thought that just bubbles up from our subconscious mind, from our superconscious mind, and the thought appears, and the thought appears, and the thought appears. That's native, pristine thought. That thought is great. Where the problem lies is when we take that thought and we run after it. It's like, oh, gosh, why am I thinking that? I'm such a bad person for thinking that. Or, oh, isn't that a lovely thought? This is so great. It's that we go chasing it like a dog after a bone, the thought. And what I'm suggesting is that when we begin to move beyond thought into direct reality, we don't chase down our thoughts with other thoughts. It's like our other thoughts are like a burden, like we're trying to carry our words around so that it's like, okay, now I've got it. So I'm going to try to remember it and keep doing the same thing over again or thinking the same thought over again. Or now I don't have it, so I'm going to move away from it and I'm not going to think that. I'm not going to think that. Okay, feel that energy. I'm not going to think that. I'm not going to think that. That energy is not powerful at all. So choosing our thoughts is not as effective as looking at what we're thinking. Just looking, being present with what is, rather than trying to generate our thoughts, trying to manipulate our thoughts. And if we don't look at our thoughts, then there's very little space between our thoughts. It's like we have thoughts that bubble up, then we have the thoughts that we use to fill in the cracks of our thoughts through our mind, and there's no space left at all. Have you ever been with someone that you couldn't get a word in edgewise? You'd sit there and patiently wait and wait and wait and wait and wait and wait, and they didn't shut up. Like, gee, many crickets, could you just shut up? But they never did. Do you remember how draining that is? Well, that's what it's like in our mind when we fill in thoughts between our thoughts. It's draining. It's not enlivening, because the light that could get through between our thoughts is not allowed to shine through, because we've got this vice clip over it with our other thoughts, our manipulative and controlling thoughts. Now, let me tell you, I'm not saying this to make anybody feel like you are bad people. You're not bad people. I'm talking today about the nature of the mind. You have to have good self-esteem to be able to look at what the mind is doing and how it's tricking you, so that you can just look at it with an evaluation that says, not, oh, you bad person, but just, this doesn't work. I can see why there's got to be a better way. So thinking is optional part of the time. I love to say this. If I had a drinking problem, I'd be a what? Right, an alcoholic. But I have a thinking problem. Therefore, I am what I call a hard, H-A-R-D, a hard-aholic. Because I suffer from too much thinking. And I'm not talking about that. Some people use that idea, oh, you think too much, to shut someone down that maybe has a brilliant idea. But I'm talking about just literally thinking too much. Too much thinking is bad for our health. Papa G tells a story in his book, Wake Up and Roar, and it's about a young woman who's about to be married. And she's walking down the road in her village, walking toward the forest, and her mind is filled with thoughts of the wedding and thoughts of the party the night before, and she's dreamy, and she's totally absorbed in this wedding. And she enters the forest, and when she does, a lion jumps out in the middle of the road. Oh! And there she is with a lion right in front of her. In that moment, where is her mind? Where was her past? Where are her thoughts, her plans for the future? They're all gone. The mind stopped. It was present. It was with reality. Her mind probably wasn't even saying, oh my gosh, there's a lion, because it was so immediate and so quick that it was just this direct experience of what was. The future is dependent on our past. Her mind was dragging up from the past and creating the future. Because the mind is a grave digger. It digs up bones from the past and then it just chews on them, it gnaws. I'm saying today, welcome the lion on your path. That thing that comes unexpectedly right in front of your face to jar you into reality. The fish cries. The fish goes, I am thirsty, I am thirsty, I am thirsty. But we're like crying fish. We're crying, I'm not who I am. I'm not who I am. I'm not one with the source. I'm not who I am. We use our thinking to lie. And our entire lives are built on thinking lies. And it's hard to give those thinking lies up. We cannot be separate from our source. We cannot be separate from who we are. I mean, even if I walked outside and I went, I am not human, I am not human, I am not so tired of not being human. It would be totally ridiculous. I'm human. I can't undo that. I know that I'm more than that, but that is a true identity for me. I spoke with a young woman whose boyfriend left her and he went back to his previous girlfriend. And she said, he abandoned me. I'm all alone. He left me. And I said, well, if he was your father and you were between 1 day old and 15 years old, he could abandon you. But you're a 45-year-old woman. And you can't be abandoned because you're always here with yourself. You were here. I mean, no one can abandon you when you're an adult. You only abandon yourself. So today I'm not really here to tell you what to do. The whole idea that I had today was just to blow your mind. I just want to get your mind quieter. I heard a well-respected teacher talking about Eckhart Tolle, and he says, well, in this book, Tolle doesn't tell us what to do. And I mean, I love this teacher. I mean, he's a brilliant and wise teacher. But my mind thought something different. I thought, Tolle hit the nail on the head, because enlightenment is not really a doing. It's more like an undoing. So when I talk to you today about the nature of thought, what I'm actually talking about is unthought. Because without this stillness, we never will directly experience reality. And reality is the birthplace. It is the home of love, of peace, of harmony, of equanimity, of life. That is of abundance. The still place is the birthplace. And we can move from the still place into duality, into life with its opposites. But until we drink from this fountain of love, then the search is still on. So all I really wanted to do was challenge the mechanism in the mind that thinks. And so right now what I want to do is open up the lines, and if there's anyone that has a comment or a question about the mind and thought, or anything that I had to say, or any agreement, then this is the time to do that. So Jim, I think if you can unmute the calls now, then I ask for comments or questions.
Hey, and I was wondering if I was getting a little confused about the difference between what you're describing, meditation. Some religions have like nirvana, and do you understand what I'm asking?
Not exactly.
Yeah, well, I'm having a really hard time putting it into words, because when I want to go to sleep, I can just let go all thought, and your process of meditation, and the process, up to the point where you just let it all go, and my understanding of nirvana and that type of thing seem very similar.
Okay, I'm going to answer your question without answering your question, and that is, what I invite you to do in terms of if you're going to use any kind of technique is to be still and to be present and to watch your thoughts. If you choose any other technique, that's fine. There's so many of them that you can choose. And in doing that, I would invite you not to know what it is that you're trying to get, but to be curious in the present moment, to see what appears as the mind becomes more silent and less manipulative and controlling. And what I suspect normally would happen is that there are fruits from this, and different people receive different kind of fruits from their labors depending on the disease they've been suffering from. I mean, there's a healing in a different way. And as we become curious and say, I'm not sure what will happen if I do this, but I'm going to do this, and I'm going to give you a technique, because the easiest thing to do is to just to ask a question, and that is, the question could be, what am I thinking? Or the question could be, am I here? And to just have that silence after that question, because that will give you a silence, and it's also a call to consciousness and a call to be here. But there's so many more techniques. I mean, sometimes it's just watching, but so I'm going to say, we don't have to know what other religions or other people are talking about in terms of the thinking or the intellect, because it's possible. There could be all different kinds of realms, of astral realms of heaven, realms of consciousness. I know that you've been to some of these realms of consciousness, as have I. I've been to some amazing, all kinds of out-of-body experiences, having been through years of meditation, all kinds of of happenings, but what is really important is the present right now and the quality of our lives. And when we go into intellectual stimulations about other religions and what they're about and so forth, what we do is that we miss this presence and the opportunity that we have to be alive and present right now and to directly experience reality.
Okay, you answered my question.
Okay.
I know the difference. Thank you.
Okay. So there are any other comments or questions?
Yeah, and it's Judy. For such a long time, I was just trying to breathe away the thoughts that were creating the negative feelings in my body. I was just trying to breathe them away, and that's good. There's nothing wrong with that. But you taught me that that when I'm having those hurtful feelings and thoughts, the thoughts that are creating the hurtful feelings, is to just follow them in my body.
Those are the feelings.
The feelings, yeah, and I was always afraid to do that because I was afraid of the intense pain of that.
Yeah, and we're going to be talking about that, the sensations, but I want to go back to something.
I did that. I was just going to say I did that, and it worked for me.
Okay, I want to go back to what you first said, and that was that when you tried to breathe away the thoughts that you were having.
Yeah.
What I'm suggesting, and this is what happens when we resist the thoughts that we have, it causes suffering. So if we have an original thought that's bubbling through our mind and we see that thought, there should be no pain there. That original thought is not causing pain unless we have a thought on top of it that says this is a bad thought. This is something I've got to get away from. It's not the original thinking that's a problem. Even if the original thinking is I am an idiot. If that thought bubbles up, it's like I could just be looking at that like, what an interesting thought. I'm surprised that thought is there. Or, it could be, I'm such a sucker, I'm such a fool, and it's like, wow, how creative I am. So that's all I'm saying. The secondary thinking is where we get into problems. It is not the original thought that bubbles from the mind. It's the secondary thought.
Yeah.
And what you're doing is great, talking about the feelings and how to deal with those, the sensations we're going to be talking about. That's the topic next week for the call, because as I'm saying, we've got thoughts and feelings that we need to do something with, and the feelings are more addictive and they drive us more than even the thoughts. But today was about thoughts. But thank you for that question. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Okay. Well, I'm so glad to have you here, and if you are not on the mailing list, you can sign up to be on the mailing list at the Easy, and that is easy, not EASY, theeasysecret.com. theeasysecret.com. You can also do a search on that at Facebook. I'm on Facebook. I'm Ann S. Gillis on Twitter. That's ANNE S. Gillis if you'd like to follow me on Twitter. And I hope that you can join me next week when I talk about what to do with the feelings that we have that are so addictive and they overrun our lives. I'm really glad to have you here today, and I look forward to speaking with you next week. Take it easy, make it easy, and have a great day. Bye.
Thanks, Ann.
Bye. Thanks.
Bye-bye.